Hi, everybody. This is Kurtis from the Library of American Comics, and you are watching LOAC-TV, the Library of American Comics Television. And I thank you for joining us today. We're going to take a look through some Star Wars books. But before that, I just want to say that you can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that good stuff. If you just look up LOA Comics, Library of American Comics, we're all there. You can sign up for our newsletter by heading over to libraryofamericancomics.com. And yeah, join our comic strip appreciation Facebook group as well, where we kind of talk about comic strips all day long and have some fun discussing the rare and not so rare comic strips of the past. Okay, today I'm flying solo. I've had a guest. I've had a guest the past couple of weeks, but this time I'm going to be by myself talking about Star Wars comics. And if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to leave some comments so I know that you're watching and so that I can say hi to you. And in case you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask questions, and I will do my best to see if I can answer them. Books we're looking at today, this is Star Wars classic newspaper comics, Library of American Comics. We did this in 3 volumes, reprinted the entire run, and I'll take a look at this in better detail. But one of the questions that I'm often asked is what's the difference between these books that we put out and the Star Wars epic collections that Marvel put out, because they came out kind of around the same time, and a lot of people are confused. What's the difference? Which one is better? So I'm going to take a look at both of these, and we'll take a look inside, and we'll compare the contents to see which you prefer. I admittedly, since this is the Library of American Comics television YouTube channel, we're going to be a little biased and probably say that our books are better, but I'll tell you why they're better. They're also Eisner Award-winning books, just so you know. This is an Eisner Award-winning series. Let's see. What should we do first? Let me give you a little rundown of the history of the Star Wars newspaper comic strip. Star Wars, of course, came out in '77, and it became a huge hit. And like a lot of huge hits at the time in the '70s, a newspaper comic strip would accompany it. There were comic strips for Star Trek. There were comic strips for Dallas. There was a whole ton of different franchise comic strips. But Star Wars got theirs as well. Originally done by Russ Manning, who in the newspaper circles is probably well known for doing Tarzan. Yeah, so he did the first few years of the comic strip, and then it handed over to a couple other people, including Alfredo Alcala, and then eventually to the team of Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson. And the strip ran from '79 all the way to 1984. I better double check that. 1984, and where's my volume 3? This was very contemporary at the time, 1984. Contemporary at the time because these movies were coming out. So at the same time as these newspaper strips were coming out, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi also hit theaters, and they kind of influenced a lot of the stuff that was happening in the newspaper strips. Now, unfortunately, Star Wars had a tight rein on the content that could be had in the newspapers, comic strips, and all the media, so that it wouldn't step on the toes of what they were planning to do in the movies. So things like, Darth Vader makes appearances, but he always gets away in the end because, can't have him defeated, because who knows what's going to happen to him in the movies in the future. We know in retrospect, so there are a few things in here when you read these that are no longer canon. They don't make sense in the grand Star Wars universe because these were written at a time when that expanded universe hadn't been developed yet. So why don't we take a look at the insides of some of these books? As with all Library of American comic books, they are presented landscape. Well, not all of them. Most of them are presented landscape so that you can get the best bang out of your buck art-wise. The Sunday comics are in full color so that we can get a good representation of what the strips looked like when they were originally in newspapers. And one Sunday takes up an entire page. And then the dailies are in black and white. And there's 3 dailies per page. All of these beautifully scanned and restored from proof sheets. The back cover has a nice Sunday on it, and you can see, look at all these logos down here: Marvel, Lucasfilm, and Disney. I can't imagine what a licensing nightmare this was to try and coordinate. And then they all have a nice bookmark, cloth bookmark in there as well. And under the dust jacket is just the same printed cover, but this got some beautiful end papers of some of the just advertisements for the newspaper that were coming out around the same time. So I'm going to take this dust jacket off just so it's easier to maneuver. And the second volume and the third volume are the ones that I think people like more, just because it's the Archie Williams and Al Williamson work. And we'll take a look at those ones as well, because the artwork in there is pretty stellar. But I'm just going to take a look at the inside of this book first. And so let's add this to the stream and solo it. I'm my own technical support here, so you can let's get a closer look. We'll take a look at the newspaper strips a little bit later. We're going to take a look at this one first, though. So in here, there's a lot of really cool kind of bonus features and behind-the-scenes stuff. Each one of the volumes is accompanied by an introductory essay by Rich Handley, who is a huge Star Wars and Star Trek fan. He's done a lot of work in keeping all of the stuff, the comic work, in print. And then Henry G. Frank III does a little bit of an essay on Russ Manning, and here's Russ Manning right there. You can see some of his Magnus robot fighter. Yeah, that's another thing that Russ Manning is really known for, is Magnus robot fighter. What's really cool in this book here, I'll give you a little peek, is these strips are not in the Epic collection. This is the 6-episode sample that Russ Manning submitted as a tryout. It's just it's like a test, and this is what got him the job doing the Star Wars comics. So that's kind of a cool bonus. And then here's our table of contents. The stories are broken up into sections here. Each of these dailies ran about each of these stories ran about 2 months or so, and then they would switch focus and start a new story. And all of this is presented in order, in the order it originally, actually, I shouldn't say the order that it originally was presented, because first of all, when the strips first came out, the dailies had a separate continuity from the Sundays. So the first story in here is all dailies, Russ Manning dailies, presented in its original black and white. You can see the dates in the bottom corner there. And then once you get past the first story, then we get into a story where it's just the Sunday continuity. So it's just pages and pages of the Sundays, one after the other. Some exciting. I like the nice, not typical comic layout where it's this panel stretching over the 2 tiers. And then when you get later on in the book, and the continuities start, the Sundays and the dailies share the same continuity, then we get 1 week of dailies on 1 page, and then Sunday, and then it will start again Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Pretty nice here. Get some close-ups. Restoration is really nice. These are scanned and touched up from proof sheets. So that's the basic look inside here. There's just, look at this. This one daily decided to stretch across the entire tier, not broken up into panels, just to convey the massive scope of the Star Destroyer. That's pretty cool. But I tell you, when you're reading it daily in the newspaper and you only get this one panel, it doesn't seem like much, but it's really cool when you get it all collected in a book together. Again, if you're watching and you're just joining us, feel free to leave a comment and say hi, just to let me know that you're there. Or if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer your questions here as well. Okay, so what's the difference between Star Wars, the newspaper comic strips, and Star Wars, the epic collections? So in order to understand this, I think that I need to explain a little bit about Star Wars history. So I'm going to come back to you a little bit and tell you that Star Wars, when the franchise hit the 90s, Dark Horse Comics got the license to reprint or to make Star Wars comics. And so they started making their own stories, but then they also started reprinting the old Star Wars stuff that had already come about. So they took the newspaper strips and they collected it into a monthly series called Star Wars Classics, and that came out every month for 20 issues, and that collected all of the Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson newspaper strips. It didn't collect the Russ Manning stuff and the stuff that came between Manning and Williamson. It was just the Goodwin Williamson stuff. And then after that, a couple years later, they then went back and had another book called, what do they call it? Classic Star Wars, The Early Adventures, which ran for 9 issues and collected the Russ Manning stuff and stuff that was missed. They didn't actually get everything that the newspaper strips printed, almost everything. This book tries its best to collect everything in order as it originally appeared in the newspapers. So it's kind of a little bit of a mishmash between the original stuff and then the stuff that was printed by Dark Horse. Now, the thing also to know about the Dark Horse comics is that since it was a comic book size monthly, they reformatted all of the artwork so that it would fit onto a comic page. So if you go to, let's see if I can find a good example here. This page here, Al Williamson, beautiful stuff with the AT-AT. And obviously, this is not a typical layout for a newspaper comic strip. They actually got Al Williamson to redo or expand or add to the artwork to make it fit the comic book page. And then, of course, they added the color. Some of these ones, like this page over here, you can tell it's definitely a little bit more comic strip-like, but again, broken up and reformatted to fit the comic page. Sometimes they would leave panels out because the way the comic strips are written is that you'd have to, since it was daily, sometimes the first panel of one day would be a recap of what happened yesterday. And so when you put them back to back like this, you don't need to have that extra like redundant information. So they'd take out a few panels here and there if they needed to. The other thing that the Star Wars Epic Collections do, first of all, the very first story in the first Star Wars Epic Collection is, what is this? It's a Star Wars KB Toys comic exclusive that made a truncated version of the Sunday continuity at the very beginning. You know, when I was showing you all of the Sundays in a row, that story is truncated, but instead of reprinting the truncated version, they have a cover here, but they've also provided all of the Sunday strips in full so you can get the full story. And because this is a comic book one, they didn't bother reformatting this one. They instead printed it sideways. So you have to turn your book on an angle in order to read these ones. It's a little bit difficult if you are reading it like this, but that's otherwise, you know, it would have to be really, really small, shrunk it down quite a bit. So that's the first issue, and then, yeah, and then they didn't print these in chronological order according to release date. So they put the early adventures first, all of the very first stuff that came out in the newspaper comic strip gets it to be at the forefront of the newspaper strips Epic Collection. And then at the very end of this one is where we start getting into the Archie Goodwin, Al Williams and stuff. And then there's a second volume. And this one is the remaining issues Classic Star Wars numbers 5 to 20, which is all Al Williamson and Archie Goodwin and the assistants that worked with them. So you want a side-by-side comparison, you say? You want to see what they look like when they're put next to each other? Sure. Let's take a look. I'm going to take a look at the Al Williamson, Archie Goodwin stuff, since that's stuff that seems to be a little bit more favorable. So I'm going to pull out volume 3 of the Star Wars series that we did, and volume 2 of the newspaper strips. And I'll put this back in the stream so we can have a closer look. Okay, so these ones are not quite dated. They're dated at the beginning of each issue for us to reference. So let's take a look at this. This one is Classic Star Wars number 11, originally published as a newspaper comic strip in 1982, July 2, 1982. So let's find that date here. Actually, this is going to be in volume 2. Sorry, my camera's a little shaky here. It's going to be in volume 2. It's going to be toward the end. March, May, June, July. Okay, here we go. Here is July 12, 1982, as seen in the newspaper comic strips. And then here it is on the page in the Epic collection. And I'll put these side by side for us to have a look at. It's kind of hard to show it all off like this. See, that page, that panel's really expanded. It went from being a one panel to a much, much wider panel. And then there's Obi-Wan and Darth Vader making up the bulk of the rest of that daily. The color is nice. I'm always a stickler for seeing things as they were originally presented. And let me tell you, Al Williams' detail is so incredible that in black and white, it just looks outstanding. So here's a picture, for instance, of Darth Vader in color by Williamson. And here's the black and white. Now, Darth Vader especially works well in black and white because he is a black and white character. But I just love seeing the intricate detail that we can see here. And he's all over this book. Okay, so there's a Sunday page here. Let's see how the Sunday is broken up in this book. The classic Star Wars comics and Dark Horse comics don't include any of the top tier with the logo. They don't include the logo, and they don't include the throwaway strip, which is always a Star Wars scrapbook, and they'd have different pictures of the characters or the ships or the weapons. There's even a George Lucas throwaway panel in there. But here's Luke Skywalker. How does the color compare as well? The Sunday color. And this panel here doesn't even show up in the Sunday. It's from the day before, right there. So they're playing around with the order of the strips in order to tell the story in a way that's not daily. So there's that panel there, which is down here. This panel's completely missing. They took that one out completely. And then this one shows up here. I don't know. This is the best way I can show you to as an example on what it looks like. You can see that they've kind of rearranged things. It's hard to show that off when I'm not in person. If I could invite you all over to my house, I would. Debbie is watching. She has a comment, says, it's a different experience with the reformatted panels and added color. Absolutely, it's a different experience. It is very different reading both of these books because writing a comic book is different than writing a newspaper strip. So you do get a way different experience. There's one thing I also wanted to show you. They did include in this one a story that didn't make it into the comic books. There's one panel blown up to a full page. Amazing. These ones from 1980. So they reprinted them just as black and white dailies and the Sunday color because that story didn't make it in. So nice that they included all of it. So every strip is represented in some form in these books, just not as they were originally presented. These ones are presented in chronological order as they originally appeared in newspapers. All the dailies and Sundays following one after the other with all of the top tier and the throwaway panel. And Al Williamson's amazing artwork. There, IG-88, there's a character that made it big in the Mandalorian TV series. Look at that. Such great imagination from they're writing these weird snakes. I tell ya, these are some fun stories. Here's a cool panel here. The top tier doesn't stretch across the top. That's a very, very unique thing for this era. There's a throwaway strip. But I guess if you were just going to do it as a full page, I don't even know, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the bottom tier, possibly. I don't know how they would reformat that one. But yeah, they start to get more creative as the series goes on. Love it. And just check out the detail if you see if I can get close enough. The detail is amazing. None of this comes out. All of the cross-hatching in the background there, none of that comes out in the newspaper, in the bulky, when the ink bleeds in the low-quality newsprint. All of this detail doesn't come across. But when you reprint it in these books, really, really nice, we're getting some very, very, very nice, high-quality, detailed artwork. The detail doesn't show up as well in the Dark Horse stuff too, because I think maybe their original stuff they were scanning from originally just wasn't as sharp because some of the detail doesn't come across as well. Anyway, are there, for those of you who are watching, is there anything that you want to see in particular? Yeah, just look at all the line work in the background there. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff. I like the hint of the outline on the tree stump there. He also uses the Ben-Day dots to add some depth as well, which is cool. He does a pretty good job of getting the likeness of these characters as well. You can tell that's Obi-Wan and Luke. I don't know. These books you should pick up if you haven't already, if you're thinking about it, because the chances of them being reprinted because of the contracts with Disney and Marvel, the chances of them being reprinted are very, very slim. So if you're interested in picking these up, you should probably do it before it's too late. They are still fairly new, and I think that they might still all be available. But you won't want to sit on it too long. And like I said, these won a couple of Eisner Awards, so the professionals think they're good. That's a good thing, right? Okay. That's a good peek inside these Star Wars books. I hope you enjoyed that. Star Wars, the classic newspaper comic strips in 3 volumes. You'll want to check that out at your local comic shop or online retailers. Thanks for tuning in. This has been a great little time to spend with you talking about Star Wars, even though I didn't get very many comments. Thanks, Debbie, for that one comment. If you are interested, next week at the same time, I'll be live streaming again, and we'll be talking to our special guest, Jeet here, and we're going to talk about the book that that Dean put together a few years back called King of the Comics, 100 Years of King's Features Syndicate, the kind of the biography of the famous newspaper comic strip syndicate. Very, very cool book. If you haven't seen it, we'll be taking a look inside to see what the pages look like and have a good discussion about Hearst and everything that went on over those 100 years. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you have a good day, and we'll see you next time on LOAC-TV.